Your reaction to the events overnight in the Middle East?
Well, we strongly condemn this reckless attack by Iran on Israel. There's been a real concern from the very beginning about the risks of escalation. And whilst the international community has been urging restraint, instead, Iran has chosen to do the opposite. I think all of our concerns will be for the security of people right across the region now, and it's very important that everything possible is done to prevent further escalation and to try and maintain people's security in the region.
I want to come to the risk of escalation in a moment, but it is reported that there has been British military involvement. We're not clear about exactly what it is, but RAF has been involved in some way, shape or form. Are you supportive of that?
Well, as you say, we don't know the details, but clearly I think it's in everyone's interest to have prevented the Iranian attack actually having potentially could have been a much more serious impact on people's lives. And so, of course, if UK forces are involved as part of defensive action, that is really important, and you would expect that sort of thing to happen. But I think the most important thing now is to prevent escalation. This is about the security of Israel, but also the security of Jordan, Iraq, other partners that we have in the region, and also people right across the Middle East, where the government has rightly said it is working now to trying to stabilise the situation. The UK government has said it is working to try to stabilise the situation because nobody wants to see further bloodshed take place.
I know that it's impossible in these kinds of situations to be precise about what your reaction might be, but broadly speaking, were our government to decide that it had to engage in a military fashion in any way, will Labour, broadly speaking, be in support of that if it's part of something that the allies of Israel undertake?
Well, I think this is exactly the wrong time to speculate about what may happen next. Both the UK government, we've seen the Prime Minister talk about the importance of the international work now in order to prevent further escalation in the region. Nobody wants to see a wider regional war in the Middle East, and that's what all efforts now have to be around. There's been talk about the UN Security Council discussing this, around the G7 discussing this as well, and I think that's what everyone's focus will be. But look, this has been part of a continued operation by Iran, by the Iranian regime, to destabilise the Middle East, often through different proxies, through support for Hezbollah or for Hamas, and the security threats that can pose. It's really important that restraint has been the part of what the international community has been urging, and to strongly condemn the response from Iran.
The key player today, of course, will be Israel itself. And there are many voices saying, as you say, restraint. But there are also voices saying that Israel has to demonstrate that it won't be pushed around, that it is strong, and so on. What would be your message to the Israeli War Cabinet?
I think our concern is as it has always been through this, is to ensure that we don't have a wider regional war take place in the Middle East. That would be deeply damaging for Israel. It would be deeply damaging for people living right across the Middle East. And that is immensely important. It is something that really the UK government has talked about, the Labour Party has talked about really throughout all of this, all of the events that have been taking place in the Middle East. We obviously are continuing to argue for the immediate ceasefire that is needed in Gaza, where so many lives have been lost, where we need the release of the hostages, and we need not just the security, but also the humanitarian aid that is desperately needed. But we also, in the light of what has happened overnight, need really this concerted action of all countries, not just in the region, but internationally, working to prevent further escalation in the light of these truly appalling attacks.
I don't want to make this a domestic issue, but of course, this is the Middle East, and Gaza specifically, has been a tricky issue for the Labour Party. There are different views within the party. Is there any risk here, do you think, that there may be different points of view emerging? Because there are some people, I guess, within the Labour Party who will say that actually the problem here was Israel's attack on Damascus.
Well, I think we've seen, look, there's a history here for Iran's operations in the region. We have seen really not just their operations in the region, we have obviously seen deeply concerning over some time operations in other countries as well, including concerns about the IRGC operations here in the UK, where we've seen obviously attacks on on the Iranian international journalists and other concerns more widely about security, as well as their long-standing operations within the region. So that's why I think it's really important for all of us to strongly condemn the Iranian attacks and their decision to escalate things. So I think that is important, and I think everybody would agree with that.
All right. You won't be surprised that I want to ask you about the situation with Angela Rayner. There's a police investigation going on, so obviously we can't discuss the rights and wrongs of that. But one of the things that's, I think, interesting here is that she's repeatedly said that she was advised legally she'd done nothing wrong. Keir Starmer says that members of his team have seen that advice. Is his reluctant, but he hasn't, is his reluctance to read that advice deliberate or just because he hasn't got time? Why does he not know what that advice says?
Well, let me just say this, that Angela welcomes the opportunity to set out all of the facts, be it with the police, the HMRC or the appropriate authorities. And she has done the right thing by taking the independent tax and legal advice and has been clear throughout that she has acted in accordance with it. I certainly wouldn't expect to see her their personal advice about the personal finances of any of my colleagues. But I think Angela's handled this in the right way and welcomes the opportunity to be able to set out the facts.
That wasn't really what I asked about. I mean, it's puzzling that the leader says, members of my team have read this advice, but I have not. Is that deliberate?
I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing for him to do.
It's a bit puzzling. He used to criticise Boris Johnson for not paying attention to detail, not reading his papers and all of the rest. This is a big deal for Labour. Why doesn't he acquaint himself with his own deputy's defence and advice?
I think Keir has a very strong team around him, and rightly so. And that's why I think, not only have they looked at this and been clear about it, but also Angela has as well. And look, Angela's a brilliant deputy leader of our party, and she is going to continue campaigning, continue working, just as all of us are, for the local elections, and not be deterred by, what we know is going to be political questions that are always going to be raised.
Well, you say that, but, I mean, let's be honest. Look, the reason that this is an issue more than any other, some people would say, and I probably think I'd agree, that at some level, it's not the biggest of deals. However, here's the reason that it's a problem for Angela Rayner. When Boris Johnson was investigated over Partygate, she insisted that the mere fact of an investigation being launched should have been enough to provoke his resignation. Here's what she said. Boris Johnson's Downing Street under police investigation. How on earth can he think he can stay on as Prime Minister? Disgraceful. How on earth does she think she can stay on as Deputy Leader of the Labour Party?
Well, I think these are very different circumstances. The issues that have been raised are about what happened nearly 10 years ago, before Angela became an MP.
That's not the point she made. She said somebody's under investigation. They shouldn't be in high office.
But this is about the context of the investigation that was happening while the Prime Minister was in Downing Street, when we had already been raising continuing concerns about what he had said in Parliament, about him misleading Parliament, about not giving accurate information, and at a time when he was responsible for all of these things. So, look, I do think these are different situations. But why do rules apply to him and not to her?
The reason I think I would say... You guys say one rule for them, one rule for everybody else.
I do think these are different situations, and I think Angela's also said, you know, at one point has said that, look, if the Prime Minister wants to publish all of his tax returns from the time before he was an MP, then that she would do the same. So this is different situations because we are talking about before Angela became an MP. But the other thing I would say that is really different here is that what Angela has said, which is also what she said around the allegations that we also had made by the Conservative Party as part of the run-up about Durham, was that if she's found to have committed a criminal offence, she would resign. We never had that from not just the former Prime Minister, but also the current Prime Minister, and a series of other Conservatives have been challenged. So I think there is a big difference, and that's why I think, look, everybody, you know, supports the strong campaigning that Angela is doing.